Stop. Stop scrolling. Stop whatever you are about to do in the next 10 seconds. Because the most consequential royal story unfolding inside the British press this week is not a Sussex Instagram post, not an As Ever product launch, not a Geneva speech, and not even a Daily Telegraph document release about a former duke. The most consequential story is the open civil war that has broken out inside the Daily Mail itself between named reporters with named sources fighting in public over whether there is a secret palace plan to reunite the royal family with the Sussex household, or whether the entire idea is, in the words of one of the most respected American royal observers, an emotional fantasy being pushed into the media by Harry's own circle in the hope that it will somehow come true. Picture the landscape. A new senior palace aide, by every available reporting, has acquired extraordinary influence inside Buckingham Palace in a matter of months. A senior Mail on Sunday editor has reported, with confidence, that this aide has made it his #1 career mission to reunite Harry and William and to spare the king from further pain. A separate Daily Mail reporter has filed his own version of the same story, complete with a photograph that quietly dropped into the public domain at exactly the right moment. Another Daily Mail editor-at-large, with her own sourcing, has openly contradicted the entire framing. An American journalist with her own palace source has reported that nobody, on the record or off, ever wants to see Meghan again. The headline has been quietly amended with a question mark. And, hovering across all of it, the recent memory of an 8th wedding anniversary post that landed in deafening A-list silence and an Invictus operation in Birmingham that is, by every available financial metric, in trouble. Tonight, we are walking through the entire story. The new palace aide everybody is now talking about, and the genuinely remarkable rise that has put him at the center of this. The reporting from inside the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday and how it splits down the middle. The American journalist whose palace source delivered the single most quoted line of the week. The financial reality at Invictus that one senior board member has now responded to by walking out. The 8th wedding anniversary photograph dump and the brutally precise Daily Mail column that took it apart paragraph by paragraph, and the wider question that sits underneath all of it. Is the Sussex household finally running out of road on every front at the same time? Pour something strong. Because this is the kind of week that gossip writers wait years for, and the kind of week the wider royal commentary world will be discussing for months to come. Let us begin with the new man inside the palace, because nothing else in this story makes sense without him. His name is Theo Rycroft. By the published reporting, he is a former British diplomat who became Deputy Private Secretary to the King in February. He is married to Flora Astor, who is the sister of Samantha Cameron, the wife of the former British Prime Minister David Cameron. That family connection alone gives him a level of establishment access that very few people inside the palace bureaucracy can match. He is, by reputation among colleagues, calm, politically astute, and unusually skilled at navigating difficult personalities and delicate diplomatic situations. The reason his name is suddenly everywhere is the work he has done in his first months in post. He was, by the published reporting, central to the smooth choreography of the King's recent United States state visit, the engagement that involved a difficult, high-stakes set piece with President Donald Trump. He was also, by the same reporting, central to the success of the Prince of Wales's high-profile international engagement at the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris last year, the event at which William met Donald Trump for the first time. Both engagements, by every available account, went considerably better than the British establishment had originally feared. And both engagements have, in the inside conversation of the palace, been credited in significant part to Rycroft's work behind the scenes. That is the context in which the most consequential royal story of the week landed. Charlotte Griffiths, the senior Mail on Sunday editor with her own well-established Palace and Sussex Circle sourcing, published a piece reporting that Rycroft has made it, in her words, his #1 mission and career ambition to reunite Harry and William and to spare the king from further great pain. The piece cited Rycroft's view, by Griffiths' sources, that the present family situation has become, in his alleged words, effing ridiculous, and that he is now urgently seeking to resolve it for the king's sake. One source described his attitude as believing it is time to knock the brothers' heads together. The piece went on to suggest that Rycroft sees a meeting between the King and Harry during Harry's expected July visit to Britain ahead of next year's Invictus Games in Birmingham as both possible and desirable. It is worth pausing on the wider Griffiths reporting in this piece because the framing of Rycroft is genuinely interesting. By her sources, Rycroft is described as a calm and politically astute operator capable of navigating difficult personalities and delicate situations, with quickly acquired influence inside the King's inner circle. The piece reports that during Rycroft's earlier Paris diplomatic posting, he worked closely with William on several high-profile international engagements, and that he is therefore one of the very few palace aides with credible relationships on both the King's and the Prince of Wales's side of the institution simultaneously. The piece suggests that one insider believes Rycroft thinks Harry and William must be forced to shake hands, and that he sees brokering such a moment as the route through which the King can repair his own relationship with his second son. The reporting goes on to suggest that, however well-placed Rycroft may be, persuading William to meet Harry will be, in the framing of the piece, a tall order. The Prince of Wales, by widely reported accounts that long predate this Griffiths piece, has barred any mention of Harry's name in his presence following the publication of Spare. That is a hard institutional reality the new aide, however capable, must work against. The piece was a significant editorial development. The Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday have, for years, been treated by the wider royal commentary world as one of the closest reads on the inside conversation at Buckingham Palace. Griffiths, by her sourcing, is genuinely well-connected. Her reporting on the Sussex side of the story is, by every observer's account, drawn from people in the immediate Harry orbit. But here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, because the piece, in its original form, did not stay in the original form for very long. The headline was, by the published record, quietly amended within hours of publication. A question mark was added. Anyone who has worked inside a British national newspaper will tell you exactly what that signal means. When the editors insist on a question mark being added to a headline, what they are doing, in the cold internal language of the building, is reducing the legal and editorial exposure of the piece. The question mark is the journalistic equivalent of a quiet shrug. The reporter is being told, by the people above her, that the story is not solid enough to run as a declarative claim. The Buckingham Palace response, when contacted, was to decline to comment. A source close to Rycroft himself was quoted as saying he had never held or expressed the views Griffiths had attributed to him. That is the moment the wider story stopped being about the Sussexes and started being about the Daily Mail itself. The Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday have, for at least the past 2 years, been running what looks increasingly like two parallel editorial lines on the question of any Sussex reconciliation with the wider royal family. On one side of the building, Richard Eden has been one of the lead voices behind a reporting thread that has come to be known informally as Project Thaw. The framing is that quiet diplomatic efforts have been underway to repair the institutional and personal relationships between the Sussex household and the working royals. The framing has been supported at various points over the past several months by carefully chosen photographs that have appeared in the Mail, apparently dropped from inside the palace operation itself. The clearest example was the photograph of Harry meeting senior figures in London earlier this year, with the now departed Sussex Chief Communications Officer Meredith Maines present in the frame. The image, by every available read of the dropping pattern, did not appear in the Mail by accident. Somebody inside the palace wanted that image in the public domain, and the Mail was the chosen vehicle. Now, Charlotte Griffiths' piece, with its account of Rycroft's alleged mission to reunite the brothers, has landed in the same editorial space, same publishing house, same reporting thread, same broad framing. Project Thaw, extended. On the other side of the building, Alison Boshoff, editor-at-large at the Daily Mail and one of the most senior British show business journalists at any national newspaper, is reporting something else entirely. By her commentary on the Royalist podcast with Tom Sykes, and by her quoted remarks in the reporting of the American journalist Paula Froelich, Boshoff's read on the present state of the relationship is that there are very, very few voices inside the palace who actually want to trust Harry under any circumstances, with or without Meghan attached. Her view, by every available signal in her recent published commentary, is that the Project Thaw reporting framework is significantly overstated and that much of what is being reported as palace movement is, in her phrase, dispatches from a wish, not a reality. These are not minor journalistic disagreements. These are senior reporters at the same publishing operation, with their own established sourcing, openly arriving at incompatible conclusions about whether there is a real palace plan in motion. And the most striking detail of all is the editorial choreography around it. Days after Boshoff's column reporting that nobody wanted Meghan around, the Daily Mail ran a freelancer commissioned piece by Dominique Hines arguing, in essentially the opposite direction, that the most powerful women in Hollywood will not allow Meghan to fail, supported by a roster of named figures from the African-American media and entertainment world. That piece, by every available signal of how British national newspapers commission across editorial lines, was a deliberate counterweight publication, not a unified house view. A signal that the building is, in real time, hosting two distinct editorial positions on the same story, and neither side is willing to back down. This is the genuinely consequential gossip beat of the week, not whether Project Thaw is real. Whether the British national paper most relied upon by the wider royal commentary community for inside palace reporting can present a unified picture of what is actually happening at all. Into the middle of this Daily Mail civil war stepped Paula Froelich, American journalist, Substack publisher of Paula Froelich Uncensored, News Nation contributor, tireless reporter on the Invictus financial story over the past several months, and by every available indication, one of the best-sourced American voices on the wider Sussex story. Froelich went directly to a palace source she has cultivated over years of this reporting, and the line that came back is the line that has now been quoted in royal commentary all week. There is, by her source's account, no Project Thaw. The king would, by the source's framing, like to see his son and his grandson. But, in the line that has now traveled, nobody ever wants to see Meghan again. The reasoning, by the source's account, is straightforward. The palace believes Harry himself is, in the source's words, fully untrustworthy, and so the situation is, in practical terms, structurally impossible to manage. You cannot work institutionally with somebody who has, in the palace assessment, used every prior private conversation as material for a future memoir, broadcast interview, or streaming series. That sourcing is precise. It is single source on the record from one well-placed palace voice, channeled through a named reputable journalist. It is not, by any honest reading, gospel. But it is consistent with everything else credentialed observers have reported across the past 3 years. Alison Boshoff, agreeing with Froelich on the published record, added that even the framework of any thaw must, by her sources, be read as Harry's own preference being pushed into the public space through friendly outlets in the hope that the framing becomes the reality. The pattern, by her account, repeats itself reliably. A story appears suggesting Harry might be welcome at Sandringham. A story appears suggesting the king might meet Harry on his next visit. A story appears suggesting institutional efforts are quietly underway to bring the brothers back together. The stories appear, the audience reads them, the wider commentary repeats them, and then, by every observable signal at the next ceremonial event the working royals attend, nothing has actually changed. Boshoff's framing is that these are wishes published as news. The audience increasingly has begun to read them that way too. Froelich added one more line in her commentary that is worth pausing on, because it captures the wider operational difficulty of any imagined reconciliation. By her account of her source's framing, even the practical mechanics of any meeting are now extraordinarily constrained. The king cannot, by her reporting, be alone in a room with Harry. Somebody has to be present at all times. That is, by Froelich's framing, the kind of restriction families place on relationships in which trust has, in practical terms, fully collapsed. It is also, by her commentary, deeply sad. The image is a father in the late stage of his cancer journey, who cannot have a private conversation with his second son because every private conversation has, in the palace's view, become public material. That is the picture from inside the Project Thaw conversation that is not making it into the friendlier Daily Mail framing. It is also, by every honest reading, the most likely picture of what is actually going on. Step back for a moment and ask the harder question. Why would Harry, by every available signal, genuinely be pushing for some kind of reconciliation right now? The honest answer, by Paula Froelic's reporting and by the wider published commentary, is that the entire charitable architecture Harry built around his post-royal identity is simultaneously in serious difficulty. Sentebale, the African charity Harry Co., founded as a young man in 2006 in honor of his mother's memory, collapsed publicly in early 2025. The chair publicly accused Harry and the board of bullying. Trustees resigned. Harry stepped down as patron of his own founding charity. The Charity Commission of England and Wales launched an inquiry. The single best argument that Harry was a serious philanthropist, by Froelic's framing, is gone. African Parks, the wildlife conservation organization on which Harry served as a board member, has, by reports across The Guardian and other outlets, been the subject of serious allegations involving the conduct of rangers in some of the territories it manages. The issue is contested. The organization has commissioned its own inquiry, and the wider reporting is ongoing. But the optics attached to Harry's public profile through his board position are not what any post-royal philanthropy operation would have chosen for itself. Invictus, the international competition for wounded service personnel, is dealing with the operational and financial difficulties documented in detail by Froelic's own months of reporting at The Scoop on Substack and on News Nation. The Australian government, by published reporting, declined to renew its $9 million funding commitment after the most recent Sussex tour there. Boeing, the marquee corporate sponsor, has ended its sponsorship. A senior board member, Maloney Poole, who held an OBE for public service, resigned from the Invictus board last week. By Froelic's own reporting and by Tom Sykes's earlier royalist coverage, the Birmingham Invictus operation has raised in the region of £4 million from approximately 11 anonymous corporate sponsors, which falls well short of the matched private contribution figure that was originally expected to sit alongside the British government's significant public funding commitment to the event. Travelist, the sustainable tourism initiative Harry co-founded as the other significant pillar of his post-royal philanthropic identity, is, by Froelic's commentary, also under some scrutiny in published reporting that was due to land soon. Look at that landscape from Harry's chair. The flagship founding charity has imploded. The Wildlife Conservation Board position is dealing with serious published allegations. The International Veterans Competition is white-knuckling its way through to next year's Birmingham event under significant financial pressure. The Sustainable Tourism Initiative is facing its own scrutiny. And the only remaining institutional source of credibility, in a sense that any of these projects can genuinely lean on, is the proximity to the working royal family that Harry walked away from in 2020. Froelic's framing is direct. Harry, by her assessment, from people who have worked with him, wants to give his life to charity. But actual charity takes work, and donations come, in significant part, from being associated with the royal family. Without that institutional halo, the projects start to wobble. The wobble, in turn, generates the very pressure that drives the press strategy now being run from Harry's circle. The press strategy, in turn, generates the Project Thaw stories that the friendlier Daily Mail reporters are now running. And the wider palace, by every available signal in Froelic's reporting, can read the pattern as well as anybody. Which is why the Boshoff and Froelich framing has converged on the same conclusion. The wishes are being published as news, the news is being read as wishes, and the underlying reality by every available signal is not moving. Let us stay on Invictus for a moment, because Invictus is the single piece of the wider operation with the most immediate political and financial exposure for everybody attached to it. The next Invictus Games are scheduled for Birmingham in 2027. The British government, by the published commitment, has committed in the region of £26 million to the event. That is a significant public outlay made by a government operating in a difficult fiscal environment and made on the assumption that the private and corporate sponsorship side of the matching contribution would come in at a comparable level. By Frolic's own reporting and by the wider coverage, the matching side of the contribution has come in well below expectation. The figure widely circulated is in the region of £4 million from approximately 11 anonymous corporate sponsors. The gap between the public commitment and the private match is, by every honest reading, structurally significant. To put that gap into context, consider what is meant to happen at an Invictus host city. The Games are, by design, a major sporting and ceremonial occasion. They involve hundreds of participating service personnel from multiple nations. They involve significant venue, security, accommodation, training, and broadcast infrastructure. They involve the kind of staging that, in any other major international sporting event, would draw a roster of named corporate sponsors who would want their logos visible at every camera angle. The fact that the current published sponsorship list consists of approximately 11 anonymous corporate sponsors rather than a named roll of major international brands is a signal in its own right. Anonymous sponsorship at this scale is not a routine corporate posture. It is, in the cold reading of charitable fundraising, the posture taken by sponsors who wish to support the underlying cause without being publicly associated with the wider operation around it. That is its own piece of gossip, and it is the gossip that Paula Frolic's months of reporting at The Scoop have been steadily putting into the public domain. The resignation of Melanie Poole from the Invictus board last week, by every available read of the institutional language used at the time, was a quiet but very clear signal that not all senior governance voices remained comfortable with the current situation. Board members of charitable institutions do not, as a rule, depart at this stage of an event preparation cycle unless they feel they cannot publicly stand behind what is happening. Poole's resignation followed the earlier departure of Sir Keith Mills, the board chair, last year. 2 senior governance departures in a single year at this stage of preparation for a major international event is not a routine pattern. It is, by every honest reading of charitable governance practice, a structural indicator. Frolic's framing of the Invictus situation, drawn from her months of reporting at The Scoop and on News Nation, is direct. The senior people inside the operation, by her sources, are, in her phrase, white-knuckling it through to the Birmingham event, with the expectation that a significant institutional reckoning will follow once the games themselves have concluded. That is the working assumption. Get to the event, run the event, honor the participating service personnel, then deal with the financial and governance questions that have built up around the wider structure. That is a difficult position for the British government, which has committed significant public money to an event whose underlying institutional health is, by every published indication, under serious strain. It is also a difficult position for the wider charitable community in the United Kingdom, which is broadly supportive of the cause and broadly uncomfortable with the present operational picture. And it is a particularly difficult position for the King, who must, by every available reading of the press atmosphere, weigh the political cost of being seen alongside any aspect of the Invictus operation against the personal pain of staying at a distance from a son and a grandson. He would, by every available signal in Frolic's reporting, very much wish to see in private. That is the calculation that sits at the very heart of every conversation about reconciliation. And it is why the Project Thaw stories, however well-intended on the Sussex side of the briefing, keep running into walls when they meet the operational reality of what would actually be required for them to be true. Meanwhile, on the Sussex side of the Atlantic, the public relations operation continued to do its own work. Over the 8th wedding anniversary weekend, Meghan released to her 4.5 million Instagram followers a series of previously unseen photographs from the 2018 wedding, multiple posts, multiple images, Behind-the-scenes shots that, at the time of the wedding, had not been made public, in part because the original wedding itself had operated under a strictly enforced no photographs policy for guests, who were required to hand their phones and cameras in at the door so that the bride and groom could enjoy what was, in the original brief, the strictest possible privacy. 8 years later, those private images, the ones the entire guest list was forbidden from photographing, have been released to 4.5 million people by the woman who originally insisted on the privacy in the first place. The Daily Mail columnist Jan Moir took the entire post apart, paragraph by paragraph, in one of the most precisely written takedowns published this week. Moir's central observation, drawn from her column, was that the wedding had been enforced as the most private celebrity event of the year, with phones confiscated, cameras forbidden, and the entire guest list placed under a strict no recording brief. 8 years later, the woman who insisted on that privacy was releasing dozens of previously unseen photographs from the day. Because, in Moir's framing, when it comes to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, privacy is a highly prized territory which they often choose to invade themselves on behalf of themselves, for the benefit of themselves. Moir's opening paragraph, in particular, has now traveled across royal commentary. She asked, with the lightness of voice that has defined her column for years, what the world's most private celebrity couple should do to mark their 8th wedding anniversary. Should they hide under a rock? Silently toast each other with fine champagne under a blanket media blackout? Bask on the out-of-reach beach? Take a hike in the Solitude Mountains? Trek along the Quality Time Alone Trail? Or, in Moir's framing, here was the bold idea. Why not go crazy and post dozens of previous and unseen photographs of your incredibly private 2018 wedding for millions of nosy Parkers to inspect instead? It was, she observed, the same wedding where the bride and groom strictly enforced a no cameras policy, with guests required to hand over their phones and cameras to ensure the couple enjoyed the total privacy they had demanded and exacted from everyone except themselves since day one. Moir's column went further. She described the release as a remarkable behind-the-velvet rope moment for a woman who, in her phrasing, so desperately cleaves to the shadows unless she has a scented candle or a spaghetti recipe to sell. She cataloged the imagery with a touch of forensic delight. The Frogmore House evening reception shots in which Meghan and Harry, in her memorable phrasing, were captured suction-kissing like a pair of squids. The carefully framed solo Meghan shots that filled significant portions of the released roll, the intimate dance footage, the recent home-recorded moment in which Harry presented Meghan with an anniversary cake, and Meghan presented Harry with a small statue of 2 penguins, intended by every available account to symbolize their relationship after the couple had once attended a fancy dress party in matching penguin costumes. Moir's central diagnosis, in the cold reading of her column, was that the more cynical observer might see the release of these photographs, which would inevitably be republished by newspapers around the world, as a calculated marketing strike, a reminder to possible commercial partners, streaming companies, and jam jar manufacturers of the vein of pure old English gold that runs deep through the Sussex brand. They are, in Moir's framing, royal, and they would prefer the audience never forget it. The honest force of Moir's column is that it does not have to attack Meghan personally to make its case. It simply lays out the contradiction in plain sight. Privacy was the public principle for which the original wedding was constructed. Privacy is the public principle that has been invoked repeatedly by the Sussex side to justify every subsequent reduction in contact with the British press. Privacy was the basis on which the legal cases against the British tabloids were brought. And privacy, 8 years later, has been voluntarily set aside in order to convert the original wedding into brand content for a 4.5 million follower account. The audience does not need a polemic to register the gap. The audience just needs the column to lay out, in clean prose, what Meghan publicly insisted on then and what Meghan voluntarily released now. The contradiction does the rest. There was one detail in the released photographs that Paula Froelich, watching from her own corner of the royal commentary world, picked up on and that the wider American audience may have missed. There are no photographs in the release of Meghan with her mother. On a bride's wedding day, the photographs of the bride with her mother are, in every other public wedding album of equivalent scale, the heart of the personal imagery. Meghan's release contained none. There were no close-up photographs of the late Queen Elizabeth II. There was no close-up of then Prince Charles. There was one photograph in which Charles appeared in the background of a wider frame. There was an additional photograph of Sir Elton John seated at a piano, an image that, by Froelic's observation, carried an unintentional echo of his appearance at the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales. What was published, by every available read, was a roll of imagery curated around the present commercial brand, not around the personal relationships that the original wedding day had been built upon. That is the wedding anniversary post the world has now seen, a privately enforced ceremony released a decade later as a brand asset by the very person who had insisted on the privacy in the first place. And the silence from the original guest list, which I have covered in detail in earlier scripts, was, by every available signal, the answer the celebrity world chose to give. Pull back from the individual beats now and look at the wider shape of what these two stories tell you together. On one side, you have the Daily Mail civil war over whether the palace is quietly working to bring Harry back. Two senior reporters with two distinct sourcing networks, arriving at incompatible conclusions, publishing in the same outlet on opposite sides of the question, with the question mark added quietly to the friendlier headline by the editors after the fact. On the other side, you have a Sussex household in California, simultaneously running an Invictus organization in financial strain, an Archwell Foundation that has formally closed, a Centabale relationship that ended in public collapse, an Africa Parks board position dealing with serious published allegations, an as-ever lifestyle brand whose anchor product imagery is being shot in a rented kitchen, a wedding anniversary post that landed in A-list silence, and a senior palace aide on whom one male reporter is openly hanging the entire future of the family's reconciliation prospects, while another male reporter is just as openly saying it will not happen. This is, by every available reading, the picture of a post-royal operation that is no longer in control of the press narrative around it. Stories are appearing that the Sussex side would want to be true. Stories are appearing that the Sussex side would want not to be true. The two are appearing in the same publications in the same week under different bylines. And the wider commentary community is increasingly declining to choose. Paula Froelic's framing is the one that has acquired the most traction. The wishes are being published as news. The news, on close reading, is repeatedly revealed to be the wishes. And in the gap between the two, the audience is, very politely, deciding which version of the story to believe. There is also a wider structural point worth making, because it explains why this particular weekly cycle has felt so different from the post-royal cycles of even 6 months ago. For most of the previous several years, the Sussex side could rely on the friendly American media to set the dominant narrative, the British rights restored, set to push back, and the wider public to read the contest as a contest. That was the operating equilibrium. The Sussex side could lose individual British press cycles and still come out roughly even at the end of every month, because the American end of the conversation would carry the brand through. What has changed in the past several months, by every observable signal, is that the American end of the conversation is no longer carrying the brand the way it used to. The Serena Williams unboxing did not land as a celebration. The wedding anniversary post drew silence from the wider American celebrity world. The American Daily Mail freelancer counterweight piece, published days after Boshoff's column, read as a manufactured response rather than as organic American media affection. The American carry, in other words, is starting to wobble at exactly the moment the British inside reporting is splitting in public. That is a structural shift. And structural shifts of that kind in the cold reading of media history do not, as a rule, reverse themselves. So this is the picture as we leave it this week. A new senior palace aide whose first months in post have been remarkable enough to put his name at the center of an entire national newspaper civil war. A Mail on Sunday reporter publishing one version of the story, a Daily Mail editor at large publishing the opposite version, an American journalist with her own palace source delivering the single most quoted line of the week. that nobody, ever, wants to see Meghan again? While the king would in private give a great deal to see his son and his grandson, if only the operational conditions allowed it, an Invictus operation in Birmingham facing a significant matching contribution shortfall and the quiet departure of a senior board member, a wedding anniversary post that recycled the most strictly enforced privacy of the entire 2018 royal calendar as brand content for a 4.5 million follower account. A Daily Mail columnist taking the post apart with surgical precision and, hovering across all of it, a working royal family quietly continuing to do what working royal families do: state visits, state openings of Parliament, the Chelsea Garden Show, the football, the patient, unshowy work that no Instagram post can replicate. The Project Thaw question, by every honest reading of the available reporting, is not going to be resolved by any single press cycle. The palace will continue to do what the palace has always done, which is to keep its private conversations private and its institutional decisions opaque. The Sussex side will continue to do what the Sussex side has done since the original departure, which is to push into the friendly press the version of the relationship it would like the audience to believe is the real one. And the wider commentary community will continue, in the patient and rigorous tradition of the best royal writing, to keep checking the public record against the published claims and reporting the gap when the gap appears. Stay sharp, stay watching. Because the story that began in Italy 3 weeks ago, ran through Geneva, arrived at a rented Montecito kitchen, and is now in the middle of an open editorial civil war at the Daily Mail itself, is not over. It is, by every honest reading, only just entering the chapter that everybody else has been able to see coming for a very, very long time. The next Sussex press cycle will arrive within days, by every available signal of how this operation now runs, and the gap between the wishes and the reality will, by every available signal of how this story now reads, only continue to widen. I will see you very soon.